Hello and welcome to episode 64. I am honored to be joined by Martin Khodabakhshian. Martin Khodabakhshian was born in London, England in 1975, but spent most of his childhood in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He spent his high school and college years in California, becoming a three-sport athlete and salutatorian at Jesuit High School, where I'm also an alumnus. Go Big Red in
Big
Carmichael,
Red.
which right? Carmichael, which is a suburb of Sacramento. He then graduated from the University of California, Davis, go Aggies, in 1997 with a degree in rhetoric and communications. He has spent, and I'll let him update this in a minute, 20, 24 years, 23 years in television, and he is a 12-time, I think it's actually 16 times now, Sports Emmy Award-winning senior producer at ESPN. He's earned many, I'm not going to put numbers out there because I think it's a little outdated, many Emmys in the short and long form feature categories. He has won awards including the Edward R. Murrow Award for sports reporting, back-to-back National Headliner Awards, and a Prism Award. He currently manages and oversees other producers and produces high-end features for the Emmy Award-winning magazine show E60. Roll Tide, War Eagle, which we'll talk about later, is one of his famous films, one of them. In recent years, on his own time and budget, he has directed and produced an independent film entitled Breathe about world record free driver William Trubridge. Martin and his wife Shalom have three children, Julianne Rose, Roman Sky, and Lila Grace. Those are some great names. Those are some great accomplishments. And I know that we have a lot to add to that. Welcome. And how did I do on the intro? Anything else you'd like to add?
You did awesome. And wait a minute, you should be getting props. 64th episode.
I
Holy
know.
mackerel! That's in a year.
Yes.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yes. As should my wife for giving me the free time. Right?
we can all thank our wives
You
for
know?
everything. So
Yes. Yes.
for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
No, you did great on the
Yes.
intro. Yeah, awards and whatever. Who's keeping track? But I got into this business for everything but awards, and God has just blessed me with the opportunity to work with some really uber talented people and get to tell some amazing stories, which we will talk about.
Totally. I'm on a Martin Khodabakhshian high. In the last day or so, I've watched your piece with Mark Hamill, the Star Wars about the lightsaber, kind of like the sport
Oh
of
yeah.
it, kendo and
Yep.
such.
Mhm.
I watched the Man Beyond the Mountain. Am I getting the title correct?
Oh yeah, strongman.
Strong
Yeah,
Man.
Hafthor Bjornsson. Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
a good one.
gosh. Oh my gosh. And I know you've done some work with Drew Robinson recently, who's been in the news, the baseball player. Is he at the AAA level now?
Yeah, he's in the hood of Sacktown now. He's a Sacramento River cat.
That's right. Okay, I thought so, right? So besides the fact that I
He'll be a
love,
good he'll be a good guest for you. I can
oh
get him.
man,
He can
oh
be
man,
episode 65 if
there
you
you
want.
go,
See,
there you
I,
go.
I am to please.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I mentioned that we're both, from Jesuit High, and we were talking before the show that I remember the days as a grade school basketball wannabe. Seeing you run the point. Your senior year, I believe you averaged what 43 points and 15 assists, more or less.
You were closer with the Emmys.
Okay,
Uh,
right.
I think you're only off by a couple there. You're probably off
Sure.
by about 40 points on that
Okay.
one, but
Okay.
you know,
But part of the state runner-up to Crenshaw High School, right? 1993. Those
yeah,
were the
that
days.
was amazing.
Those were
Holy
the
moly.
days, man.
What a
Um,
team. What a
oh,
team.
great team. And we're both blessed to have gone to Jesuit High School in Sacramento and Carmichael. Let's talk a little bit about even before that. You've done some incredible work in the writing, producing, directing field. How did you get into, I mean, I say literature, but I use that loosely. What were you reading? What was your relationship with the written word as a kid? Were you like in a print-rich environment? Was it a monolingual household? I know you said you were born in London. So I'm
Yep.
wondering about kind of those kind of things.
No, it's a great question. My dad was a well, I mentioned recently offline. I mentioned that he passed away. God bless his soul in fall of 2019. But my dad was a journalist and
Okay.
he was basically the Al Michaels, John Madden equivalent
Oh,
when it came to soccer broadcasting and reporting
wow.
in Iran back when he was, 23, 24, 25 years old, making ridiculous, bold predictions. The equivalent of us saying, we know Anthony Davis is the best starting center for the Lakers right now, but if they bench him and bring him off the bench, that'd be a much wiser play against, the Spurs this round. And people are like, what are you talking about? All of a sudden, the soccer equivalent, they would make this move that my dad would say, almost like he had been talking to the coach. And literally overnight, he blew up into this unbelievable soccer voice in Iran when things were much more stable back in the mid 70s before the revolution, which we've moved out of Iran and moved to Minneapolis. So that was always kind of there. My mom always worked hard too, and she was more of an accountant, and I suck with numbers. Geometry and pre-calculus. Who was our pre-calc teacher? My goodness, I should not be forgetting this right now. But getting a B plus in those two classes were my only B's at Jesuit the whole time, and math was not my thing. So I always loved writing. I loved reading. Actually, I loved, the Bible was an early influence, just the stories behind the Bible, more so the New Testament. The Old Testament, to this day, we're going through it again with the kids, kind of baffles you. And like, the Lord has a sense of humor, right? It's like, what is going on in some of this Old Testament writing? But I loved reading as I got older. Stephen King novels. I love the way his mind worked, not just on the twisted level, but just the surprise, turning impossible situations into terrifying, and really just coming out of the book, where I loved his movies, but I found myself gravitating towards the book more than I was.
Always better than the movie, right? Well, most of
it's unbelievable. Well, like The Shining, Cujo, Pet Cemetery, those books are way better than even the films, right? And then Michael Crichton, I became a Michael Crichton fan. And some of these guys may seem cliche, but back then it's like, what are you going to read? I'm going to read The Sphere, and I'm going to read Jurassic Park, and these books are they were very influential. I was reading way more. I felt like I was reading way more then than I was even now, even at a young age. And I just loved when you got to a page and you knew something was going to happen, and the cliffhanger to make you want to turn to the next chapter, that satisfaction of, I just finished chapter 16. Oh my gosh, here's 17. I can't wait to see what's going on. I've just been reading for an hour, but it just makes you want to read more. And I have incorporated a lot of that into the way I tell stories and the way I craft scripts, whether they're a minute-long tease for Monday Night Football, or they're a 1 hour long documentary for E60, or 30 for 30, whatever. I take those same principles of treating everything almost like a movie trailer. When you see a good movie trailer, it's not just the visuals, right? You're sort of captivated by some of the sound bites and some of the words that are on the screen or the panel that make you want to go see the movie. So I really, really gravitated towards honing my craft from the influence of just seeing what makes me want to turn the page, what makes me want to continue on and read a 350-page book, 400-page book. That's not a how-to book, because I have to read it because my wife wants me to learn how to use the Traeger. That's a big difference.
That makes a lot of sense. Did you see yourself, so to speak, in the literature? It sounds like from an ethnically Armenian family from Iran. Was it Farsi or Armenian in the household, or was it always English?
It was Armenian first. I learned my English, and I still speak Armenian, but it's the elders would frown when I mix in a few Persian words. I don't know any Arabic. I may accidentally say an Arabic word. Farsi, just probably some cuss words that my grandparents would use a lot at us. But I can hold my own with Armenian. I never learned to read or write it. My wife gets all over me for not teaching my kids how to speak Armenian. I'm like, listen, conjugating Spanish, which Spanish words and verbs were difficult. Armenian has 36 letters in the alphabet, so they're already adding more letters than you need. That's how you get a name like Khodabakhshian, right? A lot of consonants that you don't need. So there was Armenian in the household, and I learned English through my uncles who learned it from television, from watching a lot of TV. So
Right.
honestly, like indirectly watching sitcoms and even game shows and stuff my grandpa would watch, because he wouldn't necessarily understand, but he liked watching Vanna White, on Wheel of Fortune, because she's pretty. But what are they doing on Wheel of Fortune? They're spelling words.
Sure.
So I would learn how to spell words, and then we'd watch Price is Right, and you'd learn jargon.
Yeah.
So you got a taste of mainstream America through those game shows and sitcoms and what was considered funny.
Right.
And then trying not to misuse them when you're
Yeah.
5, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Exactly.
But and then I had the blessings of going to a parochial school from a young age. My mom worked her butt off, and the education system in Minneapolis is great, and the rest is history. But it's funny to think that Armenian kid would become a writer. I never envisioned that. At least not at a young age. I'm more worried about kickball and whatnot.
Yeah.
But math was never my thing. I did gravitate a lot towards English class and reading and stories. I love that from a young age.
Yeah. Was your dad a great storyteller?
A brilliant storyteller.
Sounds like
he would pull you in. Even my grandpa, who there would be scenes, my mom's dad, where my grandpa would be sitting in our duplex. Like he would live downstairs. My grandma, my mom, and I lived upstairs. My father, my mom separated when I was at a young age of 5. But we would sit at this home, and my friends would come over, and all their bikes would be all over the grassy hill, which was much bigger then than it is now. It's not really a big hill. But we would sit there, and these guys, I'd be waiting for them to come inside and play, Atari at the time, or television, or Star Wars Men or something. And they're sitting there and they're still outside listening to my grandpa tell these stories in broken English and talk to them, but just being so engaging. And they weren't going to get $1 for sitting out there. My grandpa wasn't giving them candy. He was just an enigmatic and magnetic dude. And then my dad was the same way. My dad read more books than most libraries have. And he was so knowledgeable about politics, which he ultimately got into after soccer, different governments. He would always tell me conspiracy is a word created by the CIA to throw you off. You should always question things. You should always challenge the common flow of things. Don't be sheep, don't be a sheep. Don't just follow because everyone says things. But I mean, he would just have a way of just grabbing you and just taking you on this journey. And sometimes the things you didn't even care about. You're just like, I don't care about the Iranian government. And he'd start telling you all these facts and these details, and just the way he'd use his body language. You're like, okay, what else you want to talk about?
Did you work on the E60 for Alex Smith and his recovery on his injury?
I didn't, but a very good friend, Dan Lindbergh, did. Very talented producer who once met me at the Emmys, his first Emmys, and it was a year where I won my second Emmy. And Dan was introduced by a mutual friend who had gone off to the Big Ten Network, Bill Friedman. And Bill Friedman, who was a brilliant feature producer and manager at ESPN, had Dan next to him. And Bill goes to Dan, I want you to meet Martin, Mr. Emmy guy, tonight. And I'm like, hey, man. He goes, oh, man, I hope someday I just get to work with you, next to you, because Bill talks. I'm like, hey, if you're under Bill, it's a matter of time before you start crushing stuff. And lo and behold, 6 Degrees, he directed Alex Smith.
That's one that stands out. The one I'm talking about with The Man Beyond the Mountain, watching that with my wife, my wife, it was into Game of Thrones.
Yep.
So there's that link there, but her interest would not be in the strong man, but I'm making the connection between, saying that your dad could be talking about things that people would not care about on the surface, but just the way they tell the stories. Right. So, the way that you did that film, the way you did the one about the strong man, drew her in, who wouldn't necessarily be interested. Alex Smith, I mean, I'm not as big of a football fan anymore. Because of the injuries and stuff like that. But again, that great filmmaking or movie making or writing draws the people in, because you guys know
100%.
You guys know how to tell great stories.
Yeah, I'm not into strongman competitions.
Right?
When they said, "Hey, we want you to do a film on,"
and
I was like, "Oh, maybe I get to go to Iceland." But in my mind, I'm thinking, "Ooh, good visual story. You're gonna see a monster dude lift heavy weights. We're gonna try to license some Game of Thrones footage, which I love Game of Thrones. I'm like, I'm into it, but how can I make this, what are this guy's vulnerabilities?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that are the opposite of strongman, right? That's how I always think with writing, with even just visual storytelling is, I always joke with my kids, the music you listen to these days, your version of rap, today's rap and R&B, it's all the same. And there's no storytelling, and there's more cuss words back then, but NWA had a purpose, and, Big Daddy Kane had a purpose, and Kool Moe Dee, like Run DMC. And because they did no one sounded the same. They all evolved off each other, right? Borrowed and sampled and all that stuff. But when you tell, whether it's a documentary in the writing, I always like to think of it, start on the opposite spectrum, what most people do, and then work my way back towards maybe get to the middle, right? Sure. Maybe I stay on that extreme, but just not getting in the habits of cliche writing, formulaic writing, keeping things unexpected.
Yeah.
And just getting to the, the strong man has an estranged girlfriend with a daughter he never gets to see.
Right.
And he had Bell's palsy at the time, and his own family, which he has never really asked, is sitting there saying, we're afraid he's going to flip and die. Like, we want him to win, the strong man, but I would love it if even his own grandfather did. I would love it if he would just win that once and, call it a day,
Right.
So you got to focus on that, right? Not just focus on the, oh my gosh, is he going to lift 2,000 pounds? Because at some point, that becomes white noise. So how can I draw you in, and how can we write this thing to really pull you in? And even the style of that thing was sort of catered. We got the great actor Anton Lesser. He's the mad scientist, right?
Great.
But it's not just his voice; it's working with him and then working with some of the verbiage. And he didn't change a whole hell of a lot, but you channel yourself through him. And I think the when you're writing anything, what do you want to do? You want to have range, and you want to have reach. I don't want to just have people, like you said, I don't want people just who are into strongman or Game of Thrones to love this piece. I want them to be like, that thing had barely anything to do with Game of Thrones.
You want that Venn diagram. You want those
exactly. Great analogy.
Yeah. Well, the Bell's palsy that you talked about, I mean, I was definitely wondering towards the beginning, that he seemed to have some paralysis, that kind of thing going on. And then the way that the story goes, where it's, so much stress coming from definitely his health, but more so his daughter, not being able to see his daughter, not having the custody and all that. That was just like, I mean, you feel for him. And, what is it? I mean, from the Bible all the way to Hemingway, there's nothing new under the sun. We've seen this story before about a father or mother missing their kids, but you just nailed it. I mean, it was true pathos for sure. It was like, oh man, the pictures you show, and again, huge man, little daughter. Yeah. It's like wow.
Well, the irony of the title too. Like, I mean, strong man seemed like an obvious thing, but it's like, what makes this dude strong, and what makes him crack? What makes him vulnerable? And spirit of full disclosure, I wanted to address the Bell's palsy in the first segment because I'm like, guys, you can't hide that. And ironically, my dad just had Bell's palsy, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen at on E60 or whatever show you're working with, they're smart, creative storytellers themselves. And I'm a senior producer, feature producer too. And I'm not an EP. Right. I'm not a coordinating producer too.
Right.
And their mentality was, it's good mystery, it's good thing, it's something you love to preach, and we'll get there. Why tell them right off the bat? And I'm like, because his face is halfway down to his chest. Let's just address it and move on, and address the stress. We'll tell you what you think the stress is.
Sure.
All the weights and the lifting and the blah, which is part of it. But that's another thing. I'm glad that this came up. In my writing, I also, when I'm mentoring or just talking about the writing, it's not always about the reveal. It's what you're choosing to reveal.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So a reveal that, oh my gosh, this kid's going to go meet his dad in prison. There was a story I did on a kid who got stabbed in the face by his own father, his stepdad, who also tried to kill his his biological mom as they
Oh
were
my God.
sleeping with a
Okay.
knife. Okay. He was no history of violence, no history of drug abuse, snapped one night after an argument and literally went to try to kill them.
Wow.
We got an in-prison interview with them, and I did the prison interview with the dad and the son, but I built the whole thing around the interaction of the interview. Okay, so that was the spine right off the bat. He's like, "Took you 5 hours to get here, huh? A long way." And then just a little small talk. No, Shaq just got traded to Cleveland. Yeah, Shaq. And then the next bite is, I didn't really try. I never wanted to hurt you. And the kid's got a scar on his face. You're like, what is this?
Oh.
As opposed to telling the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
showing the interview with the dad, or holding off that, oh, hey, we got the dad. And there's going to be this big confrontation at the end where he goes and asks his dad why he did that, and he's going to forgive him no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
It's 10 times more powerful building the whole thing with that spine. And the reveal is, again, we knew that the dad kind of did a half-hearted apology at the end. That the reveal was, this dad had this one moment with his son, and he's not going to get it to see him for 18 years. And that was what he got at the end of the meeting. And to me, that was 10 times more powerful than revealing that, oh crap, he's going to go to prison and meet his dad.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying you can't do that in some circumstances, but I've always been like, what are you revealing? Not necessarily just when you reveal it, but what are you revealing? Another clear example was a story on a young softball player who would go to this tree where her little brother got hit by their own family car. He was monkeying around the car. The car got loose. He got scared. He jumped out of the car, ran over him, and killed him. It's devastating. But instead of revealing that, it was about how did this child die at this? Why did I'm not going to reveal the child died. You know what I mean? They're going to talk about him in past tense. There's old video. It's like a young child, and he's not being interviewed. And what is the purpose? What are the stakes here? Why are you? So I chose to show that she's talking to him at this tree, at this plaque, showing the name, old home video. What happened? Like, aren't you just curious? Like, what happened to this kid? How could he die? Why this tree? Why is this thing at this tree? So many other questions. I think sometimes as writers, we worry too much about, well, I can't give away that the kid's dead, or I can't give away that this happened, or I can't give away that, and that can hinder the storytelling, and sometimes mess with the integrity of telling the story. You know what I mean? Like just literally the ethics of telling the story. You start relying too much on devices, than telling the story in an appropriate way and staying sensitive to the subject, as opposed to just, I don't want you, I'm going to make you think it's this. And then that's like highly offensive to the family. And then we lay it on you. So there's those things to think about too.
That's very interesting. There was a show called Southland that was on, it was one of those cop shows. It was on TNT and maybe another channel before or after. And it had a fairly short run, but it would start like you're talking about. It would start in the middle. It would start with like, the robber is, just about to jump out the window and the cop catches up and it freezes it, stop.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's like, and it puts you right in the middle of the action right away. I teach it in my class. It's called in medias res. But when you're talking about that, the idea of that's so interesting about how like it's okay to reveal. You're saying, right? Like you're saying it's okay to tell. It's okay that they know the ending in the beginning. They're still going to want to know. Yes.
Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
Change the game.
Change
the game. Why are we starting with these two people in a restaurant?
Yes.
Talking about a robbery, but the thrill, and then the movie is obviously jumping all over the place, and then
flashbacks, flash forwards.
Flash forwards. So in 2008, the documentary I did on Richard Jensen, it was the first like 15-minute long Sports Center piece with in your own words, no reporters, some panels, and I told my editor, I'm like, hey, we're going to show some shots in the beginning of this thing, some of the exact same shots in the beginning, and then we're going to pay him off later. And I'm talking like big shots, like where he's wiping clean the nameplate of his parents, him winning a tournament shot, him in jail, him visiting the jail, just shaking his head, sitting in a cell.
Is he the bowler?
And no, that's Richard Jensen is a wrestler. He's a 35-year-old wrestler.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. I
who
remember now.
who had meth addict for 15 years,
Yeah.
in jail for 6 years, 3
Mhm.
states, came back. Mom died while he was in prison, and he came back and started wrestling at age 35. Got his butt kicked at community college first year. Second year, he wrestled for the national title and got second place. To this day, I still talk to the guy, Richard Jensen,
Wow.
and two amazing editors, Eric Gallagher and Warren Wolcott. Warren, who's now editing, amongst other things that I've done, and sound mixed a million things I've done, is edited Drew Robinson. So
Okay.
again, extremely talented people. But even then,
Sure.
I remember her going, "What do you mean you want to show these shots? Like, don't we want to save those to reveal?"
Yeah.
And I go, "No,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
going to make you wonder
Yes.
why
Yes, that's what it's all about.
he's in jail." That's what
Uh-huh.
that's what. And Slumdog Millionaire. I remember
Okay.
Chris Nolan. Like Chris Nolan, not that I inspired Chris Nolan. I'd like to humor myself,
Maybe a little bit.
but he started with like the money being thrown in the bathtub and the girl smiling at him. All these shots that he comes back later, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh man, I did that like X years ago with Richard Jensen. Maybe I can do this for a while. I don't know.
Let's do our own little flashback, flash forward. Was Pulp Fiction like a formative movie for you? Was that one that kind of
Absolutely.
changed the game in your head?
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
it just showed you don't have to do things so linearly. Like I don't want my story
Mhm.
to feel like this happened,
Right.
and then this happened,
Yeah.
and then this happened,
Mhm.
and then it's like, where's the fun in that? Like, if I can
Exactly.
predict what's gonna happen,
Yeah.
I'm out. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna watch that. No one wants predictability,
Mhm.
except if you're going to the bank to your ATM to withdraw money from your checking account.
Yeah, I would say we talked
There, I
about
want to be predictable.
we talked
want
about
to be
accountants
predictable.
earlier, right? You want to be predictable if you're an accountant or something like that. Yeah.
That's
Man.
about it.
The name of the podcast is the Chills at Will podcast. It's about those writers, those lines, those poems, those movies that give you chills at will, that are thrilling to you. I'm sure you have a million, but what are maybe some that kind of stand out? I know you talked about Stephen King on the literature side, Pulp Fiction, but kind of leave it generally for you, kind of open ended. What have been some chill inducing movies or books or poem, that kind of thing?
I mean, Star Wars, but I won't.
Okay.
People who are hearing this, like, there's no way he's not going to mention Star Wars. But and the reason why is not because of. I mean, you think about Dumb and Dumber. Like, I can quote Dumb and Dumber left and right with Drew Robinson. Him and I could quote the entire movie.
Ah,
From start to
nice. Nice.
But it's like, why do movies like Star Wars or Goodfellas or The Falling Man by Tom Junot, who I was just blessed with to be able to work with, or The Red Bandana with Tom Rinaldi,
Oh, okay.
who did a TV piece and then wrote a book. Why do these books? I'm not humoring these guys or trying to earn points with them with saying, wow, these guys are next level reporters. Oh, I hope I get to work with them someday. Or they value me as a storyteller. It's because I read their columns and I'm like, Tom Junot is the guy that named the infamous photo of the man jumping from the Twin Towers and cut right in the middle in the suit.
Yes.
The Falling Man. The
Yes.
photographer didn't even call it The Falling Man.
That's
Tom Junot.
That's an incredible set of. I mean, that piece. Oh man,
it's an incredible piece.
Yeah.
And to think about, I'm not only just the way it's written, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to find out who this is. But then on just a freaking different level that you didn't even think, he's going to explain who this guy is in all of us. And just like, I mean, that is just next level,
Yes.
But just even like, it's been not just epic movies and things that I've read. It's been the people behind the work that I have been so blessed with. I just got off the phone, and these guys are like my closest friends and my brothers. You know what I mean? It's like one thing to work with incredible other co-directors or producers or an editor, but what's amazing is in our craft, we have access to not only amazing lyricists, but they stress why it's important not to just use big vocabulary, right? Or an amazing metaphor. They have all bought in that if you don't feel something after watching or reading something, it sounds so obvious, but if you don't leave feeling something, and it doesn't always have to be sorrow, it doesn't always have to be, oh, what a great triumph at the end, or hope. It can be fear, it can be, Drew Robinson's story resonates because Jeff Passan, baseball MLB writer, who every day is tweeting and writing every day, but it's usually about so-and-so got traded. Or this is the greatest thing you're going to see all day, because well, he's constantly writing, right? He's constantly trying to get your attention and feeding you information. But this story, he had to be like, holy crap, our worlds were blown out of the water, because now we have to worry about not just Drew and how a suicide survivor is going to take this, but the mental health community, how we represent ESPN representing a story about mental health. And now you're just like uber conscious, not just trying to be safe for the sake of being conservative and not offending people, but we're talking to suicide awareness guideline writers, and one person saying one thing and the other person saying the other thing. Talking to Drew and their family. I mean, we're dealing with body cam footage of a guy laying in his own couch after he shot himself, like 911 calls. And how do you, but writing took on a form of, it teaches you how to communicate with subjects you're interviewing, with subjects' families, with agents, with high profile stars that want to give you 30 minutes of their time total for something. So it's I could list a dozen, all the Avenger movies. I love Marvel movies because the way they tie in with each other. Even the movies that aren't as great as Winter Soldier, in my opinion, it's still amazing how they tie things together. And then I go, oh, how can I do that in my 5-segment film and plant a seed in segment 2 that's not just a throwaway, but really bring it full circle with the device I'm using, whether it's through word or visual, to go, oh, I remember that. It's like the blue milk, right? Star Wars, blue milk, they drink blue milk. Oh, look, Rogue One. Oh my gosh, blue milk. So that it's not just a throwaway nod, like, hey, yay, there's blue milk. That's so cool. I remember blue milk, and that but that feeling of nostalgia. How can I really capitalize on the storytelling devices and the words that I'm using in my storytelling?
Well, I love how you started off with Dumb and Dumber.
Have to.
So if I were to say to you, what's the soup du jour, you would say?
That sounds great. I'll have that.
Nice. Nicely
done.
That's
sea bass right over there. I mean,
sea bass didn't know what was going on, man.
No, he had no idea.
On a much more serious, the Falling Man. I mean, I'm exaggerating to say, like, before our time, people say, here's where I was when John F. Kennedy was killed. Here's where I was on 9/11.
Right.
I feel like the great literature, even, or the great movies, like I remember where I was when I read Falling Man.
That's the
right?
effect that it has.
Right.
That's the effect that it has.
For whatever reason, I as a teacher, I think I was maybe like proctoring like SAT or some sort of standardized test. So I'm sitting there with nothing to do. So one of the rare times I printed it out. I printed out how many ever pages, and I remember reading it, so it's amazing how good of a piece that was. And you do remember those, like where I was when I read it for the first time, that kind of thing.
I remember the reason I mentioned to you earlier offline about Mr. Ed Traffman, Jesuit.
Yes.
He came in as a substitute teacher for Mr. Evans, our biology teacher, who was probably the scariest man in the history of Jesuit, but one of the coolest men. And he was gone one day. We're like, this dude never misses anything. And here's Mr. Traffman, and he's literally the opposite of Mr. Evans. You know what I mean? Like, very just like, I don't know, like, I don't even know how to describe it. He's literally the opposite of Mr. Evans. So he's sitting there and we're like, who's this guy telling us we need to open our books and blah, like, come on, man. Like, we only listen to Mr. Evans. Little did I know that Mr. Traffman would be the most influential, like, English teacher in my entire life.
Yes.
And just reconnected with him on Facebook. Mr. Traffman, if you listen to this, I owe you one. I'm so glad I never got jug or got caught for jug in your class. Probably deserved it like 20 times.
For it. Yeah.
But I remember him like assigning required reading. And I want to say it was over the summer. And I was like, what? And then we came in, I think we read Catcher in the Rye in his class. Now, that's a stereotypical, like, oh, everyone's got to read. There's a reason why everyone's got to read Catcher in the Rye. But like you said, I remember being at home in Sacramento, going into my back patio and just being like, I don't want to read this stupid book. And then next thing I know, I'm on page, 70 that day, and
totally.
Again, like the books that have crossed my path that have just really sucked me in. I just read this. And what's amazing is I love it when people in my craft, like one of my closest friends, Michael Shallis, brilliant editor, producer, director. We did the Star Wars doc. We've done all the Star Wars things I've done together. We talked earlier today. We're just always thinking ahead, when we have 10 projects, what's the next big thing we're going to do?
Right.
And he'll be like, dude, you got to read this book on Hirsch. I'm butchering his head because I've got a million things going on in my head. Paul Hirsch, the guy who edited Star Wars, edited Empire Strikes Back, edited Ferris Bueller's Day Off, edited Pluto Nash. And he's like, read this book. And I read this book, and it was, even though and I was an editor about 20 years ago, but then focusing on directing and producing, but it's like, dude, you will appreciate this so much, and not just because this is the guy who edited your favorite movies of all time. And just reading the way, and this was just an everyday guy like you and I who was in the craft and decided, I'm going to write a book about my experiences. So he's not making like, Chris Connolly, Mr. MTV, now ESPN, like that dude's vocabulary, like he starts talking to us, even the simple sense. And we're just like, I think I know who Remus and Romulus are, Chris. I got
Remus
that.
and Romulus, that's funny.
You lost me after that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't always be about, you got to be able to use a 10-syllable word and a different word for cheese 6 times. Like it wasn't about just showing your vocabulary, your prowess in that regard. But when those guys tell you, hey, you should read this, or you should watch this, or check this out, and it gets you to thinking in that way, in a different way, because they know it's going to stimulate. You have a style, you have whatever, but the more you can, Tom Ronaldo gave me the greatest compliment ever, because your greatest tool, your greatest strength is you have incredible range. You can do a funny story, you can do an investigative story, you can do an emotional story, you can do a story about a person with a handicap, you can do a story on the most elite athlete on the planet.
Sure.
And they all make people feel. And I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing everyone's ever said to me. So that's key.
It's about making people feel, right? And you've clearly
otherwise what's
that.
It for?
Yes,
I've tried.
Exactly.
But again, it's never a singular thing. And when you write, or even when you teach, you learn things from your students. You learn from their feedback. You learn from books that you read. Sure. It's never a one-man band. Like it's, you want to call me the quarterback, the midfielder, the point guard, whatever.
Right.
There's no better feeling than having your team say, oh my gosh, you're high-fiving. And then obviously I'm the producer director. I'm going to get the first email. But the more my dad always told me, the more you stay humble, confident, but humble and a team player, you just learn more. People are willing to share with you more and open themselves up more and let you know how they're feeling about the content. Watch the script, you're writing it. Yeah, that's fine. What's the next shot? As opposed to, I don't like the way we're saying where Drew's from. It's boring. Can we get in that a beat later? Can we do a moment in time before we get into his backstory? Great idea. Is that guy going to give me that if I'm not celebrating them, empowering them, him or her? So there's a collaboration in writing that I think your managing editor or your executive producer, and sometimes you learn the most from the people who literally don't think like you. You know what I mean? It's not always like, oh, I need like minds. I need just creative people. Sometimes it's the person that just is I'm confused. Like you're confusing me. I can't tell you you're not confused, right? I can't be like, no. Pete, you're not confused. Like this is what it said. Okay, well, you got one shot at it, So that's another thing, that collaboration in our craft, whether you're writing or video editing or doing whatever, it's huge.
Especially in your early days, was that tough to be able to not take, I guess, playing off a little bit what you're saying, but not to take it personally. Like if you were to throw something out there and someone's kind of like, someone maybe attacked the idea, not you, but you felt like they were attacking you. Is that?
Are you kidding?
Maybe that hasn't gone away, right? Maybe
to this day, my bosses are like, don't take it personally. I'm like, first of all, I'm pouring my soul into it, so don't tell me don't take it personally. I'm not taking it personally like you think I'm stupid or you think I'm dumb or you think, even though you're talking to me like I've never cut an amazing open, that is, but yes, the answer is yes. And think about, like, when you first get started, you're trying to make an impact, you're trying to show that you're coming up with your ideas. But the people that have really been successful around me at ESPN are the collaborators, the ones that if you throw them a good hint of music, they won't be like, I don't want to use that cut because I didn't come up with it. Or, hey, did you ever think about blah? And another thing is also balancing that. Like, I don't want to be the guy that says, when I was a manager for 5 years at Unti 60 plus doing documentaries, I literally would turn even my own direct reports away, would say, hey, I got this shoot next week and I have this, I only got like 20 minutes with so-and-so. Can I pick your brain? I'm like, yeah, but you better come in here with what you are planning or want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll talk about that. Not like, what would Martin Kaye do in this situation? Like,
Sure.
I hated that because I can do it, but I don't want to do that. And the people that have been really successful have been the ones that, hey, will you take a look at this? And I really want to do this. How do we make this better? Or does this make sense? Or do you like it? You know, whether it's a simple font or a specific color correction, or literally how the tracks are written, or if there's no tracks at all. Tracks are like the lines, the voiceover lines, you know, for the layman term. It's been all about the best of the collaboration and being able to party with that team after something is successful.
What is your job title in a word or 3 words or 5 words? Are you a director / are you a director? Are you a producer? Are you a writer?
So I'm my technical, I know you introduced me as a senior producer, which I basically had that title when I was a manager. And there was only 2 senior producers, me and my closest friend, the biz, Ben Hauser. We are senior producers because we were tasked with help overseeing a show and from greenlighting stories to overseeing scripts. Meanwhile, doing 5 to 8 features, films ourselves that year. So after that, I decided I don't want to go the managerial route because I was doing less and less storytelling and more like molding. I'm not the best teacher. I'm insane in my thoughts. I want to be doing it. I'm not the best teacher. Some would argue, no, you are. You motivate us. You empower us. That's great. I'll do that for the team. I'll do that with my crews. I'll do that in the edit room. I'll do that in the field with the DPs and the director of photography and the camera guys. I don't want to do that in a room and say, just going over your script. And I want to do it. I want to do. I want to work with the team and do it. So when that. You got to edit this part. Refresh me on the question. I was going.
No, it's all good. The idea of like just your job title.
Oh yes.
You know.
So I had senior producer, but now, give you a better in. Now I'm a feature producer, and it's a feature producer 2. So, but if I told you I'm a feature producer,
2
most
like
people outside
2 like
literally
2
Roman numerals, like the level 2.
I see.
And that's my technical. But again, even that's confusing, and people go like, well, what the heck is a feature producer?
Right.
So when I say I'm a senior producer, people are like, oh, he's a producer, and he's been there for a while. And he's got a pretty high. But even beyond that, again, guys like Michael Chalice and people I've worked with, they're like, dude, you're not just a producer. And I don't mean to downplay that title. But when you see something is produced by, producing is getting all the ducks in a row, getting this, just it's producing the content, but it's more like, especially in the Hollywood world, like just making sure everything is there. The director is like standing there and going, all right, Mark Hamill, I need you to stand here. He's going to tell you that he's his father. Okay. Darth Vader's going to tell you he's your father. George Lucas is directing. And then he's cut your freaking arm off and then tell you to join him. And you're like, what? And I need you to show this face. Like that aspect of it, I love. But at ESPN, a lot of small, I don't want to say small network, non-Hollywood networks, when you see a movie, there's 7,000 names on the credit list. We have 20 on a good day. Because we are producing it, we are directing it, we're often writing it, we are sometimes some guys are shooting some stuff, and some are editing. I'm scoring. I'm going through the music library. I'm literally scoring my own thing with library cuts, or I want to get a commercial cut. So I have many hats. But ever since, if you watch my films, I like to put directed by Martin Khodabakhshian. And I'm not going to put directed by, produced by, written by, blah, 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 by, but yeah, I like to think of myself as a film director. And it took a while to be like, well, if it's 30 minutes, is it really a film? And if it's an hour, it has to be an hour at least. But I'm like, dude, I direct films, I direct features, I direct teases, show opens. But we also have to talk to the agents, get the footage cleared, do all the other strenuous things that aren't as fun. So it is taxing. It's fun. And I think people see like, oh, you got to go to Iceland, you got to meet the strong man, and you got to, I also had to log all the video. I got the stuff transcribed, but then I had to put together an hour script is like 25 pages. That thing was sitting at 90 pages at some point, trying to condense everything. So it's a lot of work. But I relish it because it's not going in an office, punching in a clock. You know what I mean? Like it's not just sitting in front of a desk. and it's constantly, stimulating my mind and making me think create creatively.
Definitely. To use the Avengers reference, what's your origin story? How did you find out, like, man, I'm good at this. I can do this. I can do this for a living. Whether, writing or directing or all the above.
I'm still trying to prove myself. I'm still trying to, not to sound humble about it. It's not false humility. I'm still trying to make sure. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, people are telling me it's good. Are they just saying it's good because of my friends? And they're like, no, they're literally crying. Okay, well, we did something good. I think back when John Theobald, I love to give people credit that they're influences in my life. I couldn't tell you two things that I learned in his class at UC Davis. Okay. Mass media technology, couldn't tell you anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
One day Theobald comes to me and goes, why are you taking another one of my classes? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, you're so freaking, like, your brain is out there. It's like crazy. Like, you're so creative and your papers, like, you're just on this. Why don't you go get an internship somewhere? I'm like, what do you mean? Let's go to a local TV station. You say you like sports, you want to be a sports podcaster or something. Why don't you go to a local TV station? And this is good for all your listeners and the youth and the Jesuit kids and even the Rio kids and the Christian kids. We'll give them props. How'd you get started? Well, went and got an internship at a TV station to start learning editing, sitting on an assignment desk, going out with a reporter. I covered a GOP convention when I was 22 years old. I didn't even know what the heck those were.
Right.
There's George Bush. Oh my gosh, that's the guy who's running for president. Like, there's Arnold Schwarzenegger and his wife. That's cool. I know nothing about politics, but the experience and, being in a suit and asking smart questions or thinking of reacting to things. All these things I learned at a local TV level. And then as I build my arsenal of sitting in an edit room and learning how to do non-linear editing, which was the difference between linear editing, which were like tapes, like tape to tape. If you made a mistake, you had to go back to that point, pop that tape back in. Non-linear editing was, you put all your footage and whatnot in a system and you can pick and choose and do whatever the heck you want. I learned that at a young age and I was like, wait a minute. The things that I watch on TV that I get juiced about, the commercials, the promos, the trailers, I just literally did them. Yeah. And I go, and there's only one place that I want to do this right now. At the time, I was like, ESPN. So I sat there for hours after my job, come back, and I loved it. And I'm sitting there cutting this 1.5 minute Michael Jordan sizzle reel when he was out of basketball about his possible second comeback. This is when was this?
Probably 94, 95, right?
No, I'm sorry. It was 90. It was after his, it was after his second retirement. Okay. I'm like, what if he comes back again? Right?
Which he did.
Before the Wizards. Which he did. So I cut this thing and I cut it to, of course, Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, Duel of the Fates. And I literally put every single effect that I could think of on the fly, right? Just made it. And then I took all my post-game interviews from the Kings, from the A's, from the Giants games, all these things that I used to do, working under John Hank, another mentor, John Pavlovich, rest his soul, the director of photography at KOVR 13. So many, I don't even want to get on that tangent right now, but so many influential forces there. Steve Harris, who taught me how to edit. And he's like, just go in there and play, man. And I went in there and I literally edited, without knowing, my resume tape of 2 things. And that's what I sent to ESPN. And that's when I cut that Jordan thing, and I strung together a little funny thing with Shaq telling me to F off because he was dodging us during post game, and I waited for him and I asked him a question and he's like, I'm effing done. And you can see my face going like, okay, please don't eat me. But that's probably the moment. I was like, I think I can do this. And I think I can do it beyond local TV. I'm going to try for ESPN. And the rest was history. They looked at my tape and, led to an interview and they hired me.
That's awesome. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about all the great work you've done. I wanted to maybe focus on the War Eagle Roll Tide. In
the Auburn fans would love you that you just put that War Eagle first. It's actually Roll Tide War Eagle, which even to that, I had to say, guys, it's alphabetical. Okay. It's not because Auburn's better I was like, guys, dude, 4 weeks in Alabama and you will understand how rabid that fan base is. It is, everything is houndstooth. The minute you land, the taxi cabs are Roll Tide and blah. It's crazy. It is insane.
I was literally just gonna ask you that, and when I typed up my notes, I literally was like, does it matter if it's, which one is it? Is it which one comes first? And I remember being in Vegas one New Year's when there was a bowl game, and everyone was roll tide, roll tide, roll tide. Tell me a little bit more about that rivalry and what it was like to be making your documentary about that rivalry.
Yeah, it was a great pitch by Bruce Feldman and Joe Tessitore. These guys had an idea, and I had just done Breathe, my own documentary, and I was trying to dive. We weren't getting the opportunity to do a lot of hours and even half hours. We just started doing a few half hours on E60, and I was just dying to do a longer documentary. And I went and did Breathe on my own with director of photography Mike Balaka and Warren Wilcott, who I mentioned earlier. Glenn Banning was on that trip, Jeffrey Balaka. I mean, we literally went on our own dime. The Balaka brothers were like, can we just do something? Let's just do something. I'm like, God, I can't pay you. He's like, no, dude, let's just do something local. We did a story on the free diver, William Trubridge on E60. And then he asked me, hey, do you know anybody who could do a longer documentary on me, just me? Wink, wink. I'm like, guys, local is in the Bahamas. Are you in? We flew to the Bahamas, spent 6 days there, shot everything, came back, and I went to the 30 for 30 guys and I said, I just finished editing this. And Matt McCormick was the editor, dear friend, epic 17 million Emmys on his shelf. I'm like, we just edited this thing. It's done in, we spent a year on it. And what do you think? Would you want to recoup our costs? I'm not asking for extra money. I'm an internal director. And I got a little quick meeting, and my former boss on E60, Robert Abbott, was working for ESPN Films at the time. And he's like, listen, this is great. This is awesome. We'll be in touch. Next day he came in and said, hey, I think they're going to pass on Breathe. It's really good, but it's just not, free diving. It's not in the sports center niche world. Like it's not the kind of docs that they want to do, but would you want to direct Roll Tide War Eagle? I was like, yeah, what the hell is that? But sure. Wasn't a college football guy. Didn't know anything really about the Iron Bowl, but I learned very quick. And that's the thing about the craft, right? I don't know anything about free diving. I don't know anything about the depth of the rivalry of Auburn and Alabama, but I learned quick. And, we met Nick Saban, Mark Ingram, Cam Newton, Coach Dye, Pat Dye. Some of these people have passed on,
Yeah.
Terry Henley, who made up, what did he make up? Oh no, he was the one who was like the whole rolling tumors corner with the toilet paper. He was like, we're gonna beat the S out of him. And then people started throwing toilet paper. I mean, these are the cool stories of things that I had no idea. And then we found ultimately convicted tree poisoner Harvey Updike. He also recently passed away. But we found him, and he was in hiding. He was in hiding. He was in risk of his life.
Did you ever think you'd say the phrase convicted tree poisoner?
No, ever.
Right.
But I will say that you could do that doc and spend like hours just talking about the rivalry, right? The history of the rivalry. Where did it come from? Why is it Auburn this? Who's the redheaded stepchild? Why is it this way? All these things but what made that film was the fact that there was this symbol, and Alabama fans will say this is an atypical situation. Our fans aren't this crazy and whatnot. Okay, you're not all poisoning trees, but I would argue there are some intense fans on both sides. Okay, but the fact that happened, right? It made national news, and Paul Feinbaum, who was kind of like the spine, the middle, the only guy down the middle, the moderator, right? And then the fact that these tornadoes came through Alabama, which I do every year, and killed all these people, and even took the life, unfortunately, of Carson Tinker, the long snapper's girlfriend. I mean, literally, we're interviewing him, and he's telling us about a tornado ripping through the house that he's in. He's hiding with his friend, who's also in the film, Alan Estes, and killing his girlfriend. It's like it's devastating. And then how Auburn comes in to help clean up and get things back. Yeah, I mean, it's not a year-long project, but the fact that they came back, and even this disowned Alabama player, Gene Jelks, who literally turned on his own college because the Auburn boosters got in his head and said, we'll pay you tens of thousands of dollars to say that Alabama paid you to play. I mean, that's how twisted this robber. And then he comes back without wanting publicity, comes back to help his town of Tuscaloosa clean up. And a random photographer happened to see him and be like, aren't you Gene Jelks? He's like, yeah. I'm just here. What are you doing here? I'm just helping, but it's all good.
Jeez.
I was like, wow, there's so many, that's what makes you feel. Not how many times this team's won or that. Sure, the fans are going to go like, yeah. But there was so much heart buried in the rabid fan base where you're literally picking a side when you're 2 because your parents are putting on. That's late in the game. Sorry, when you're 2 days old.
Jeez.
But yeah, it was very eye opening, and it took that appreciation to a whole new level of college sports.
Speaking of like the X's and O's and the numbers, in Silent Night Lights, this is about the school for the deaf in Fremont, California, right?
Yep.
And I was like, wow, they won their first 5 games all by shutout. And then you were able to, kind of sped through those, not in a bad way, but sped through those a bit. And then got to the, the emotional part of it. And the quarterback's name is escaping me, but, one of the games where he gets kicked out and, with him, that was such
Jax Peterson and the Peterson brothers.
Yeah.
Jax is a younger brother. Why can't I think? I'm
Zach,
I should be blanking.
Zach. Is it Zach? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna double check right now because I'm 90% sure it's Zach and Jax because I want to get that right for you.
How did you hear about that great story?
So this is another part of writing that is key. So Andrea Kramer, long time, she's the great Andrea Kramer. She was sitting with me on a plane. We were going to cover a story. Couldn't tell you what story. One of the many that we cover on NFL Countdown. And she's sitting there talking to me, and she's ripping out article after article in an SI, and then has a sports section. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I just cut her off in the middle of her. She's just going on about something else. She's just kind of looking at the articles, not even kind of reading them, but just like ripping them out. And she goes, oh, you don't know about my filing system? Like, no. She goes, oh yeah, I like to rip out stories or things, the headlines or big stories at the time or almost anything. And in my basement, you will literally see, December 1985. January 2002. And I categorize them because you never know when a story is going to become important again. Again, working with crazy smart people, they teach me something and I go, huh. So I had seen this deaf football team, which, like most people, would underestimate them because why? Because they're deaf, right? It's just a stereotypical thing, being like, oh, why would that team be okay? They might be good amongst their peers and other deaf teams, but this team kicks the snot out of teams that can, like hearing teams, and that just struck a chord with me. I'm like, I love that. Underestimated underdogs. We're not gonna beat you. We're gonna destroy you. So I missed out on their good run for a little bit. Like all schools, they had some good teams and bad teams. And finally, I was like, holy crap, this team, like you just said, is on a 6-0 run. And the other team hasn't scored yet. After like 5 games. I don't remember if they even scored after 6. I reached out to the coach, and I didn't realize that the entire school can't hear. There's one person who works the front desk that can hear.
Wow.
And their trainer can hear. Everybody else at the school is deaf. So this translator calls me. It's a female voice, like, hi, Martin, this is Coach Warren Keller. I was like, I thought Warren Keller was a guy. And she's like, I'm like, hi, Coach. Yeah, I emailed you guys and just wondering, we're curious about doing a story. She's like, by the way, this is my translator talk. He's talking. By the way, this is my translator. I was like, wow. Okay, now I see what's going on. And then I'm like, listen, we would love to cover you, but I don't want to just do it because you guys are kicking butt. I want to show people that I feel like you guys are viewed as like this, you're this lost, like weird tribe of people that no one, you're just deaf. You're not human. It's different than even racial stuff. It's like, you're forgotten, abandoned. Like, what do you do when you walk into and you need to ask directions? What do you do when people are staring at you in a restaurant and you're signing? Like, I'm so intrigued by that sort of adversity that you face, let alone how to communicate and crush people on a football field.
Yeah.
And it just blossomed. And Coach Keller and Coach Mario texts me. This is the stuff I take pride in. I develop relationships with all these subjects and teams and families.
That's so cool.
And I would say 70 to 80% of the time, families have come stayed with me. Friends have come stayed with me. I call them friends. I call them brothers and sisters. There's been some journalists that will be like, nope, it's my job, not to be biased.
Stay
and I just
objective.
come in, stay objective, and I just do it. And thank you for your time, and see you later, and blah. I'll just tell you right now, that's not me.
Yeah.
That will never be me.
Yeah.
Unless you just say you want to have that distance.
Sure.
I'm not just coming in, just giving you a hug on the first day if you don't want to hug, if we haven't talked about something emotional. But if I'm going to penetrate your soul and talk about your most vulnerable times, I'm not going to treat you like a
exactly.
Just I can't be objective. That's impossible. It's not how we were taught at Jesuit, right? And for others. So that story is one of the most dear to my hearts. Tom McCallum, Vin Guglielmina, and Matt, they actually filmed The Last Dance. Those are the directors of photography of The Last Dance. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with The Last Dance.
Oh, yeah.
But those guys are next level photographers. Mike Shallis, his name's come up 1,000 times on here for a reason. He edited that film. It's one, it got nominated for an Emmy, but again, we didn't do it for the Emmy. Got nominated for an Emmy, but what's more spectacular about that, Dan Lindbergh, whose name came up with Alex Smith, he had a film on Ernie Johnson that year, and that film beats Friday Night Lights because Ernie Johnson's a 1 in a million guy. It was a great film. But the thing that was probably the most proud of is ESPN programming. Okay, people at the programming level saw that film and go, why haven't we ever done a live deaf football game on the high school level? And they broadcast their first live high school deaf game on ESPN 1. It was amazing. I remember Jesuit did it with De La Salle. We got our butts handed to us by about 70 on national television.
Exactly.
But the deaf football game was like, it was amazing. And they did like 3 minutes of like pure silence, like what a deaf family would experience watching a game, and literally commentators shut up and didn't say anything, and there was no nat sound. It was just like, I was like, wow, this is cool, man. This is cool. So that's kind of a little bit of the
that's so cool that you helped to inspire that. I mean, you talk about the lack of sound, the music, the really moving singing from the woman in the doc,
yes.
Coach Mario was awesome. I loved his
he's amazing.
His passion, and I get you.
But who knew there was different ways to talk in ASL?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's people who are introvert signers and extrovert signers, and some who don't just hearing from the kids who like their most loneliest moments are at the dinner table with their hearing family. I'm like, what? Like, or kids who are not deaf and everyone's their family's deaf and they feel like the outcast. And we interviewed the team that they played at the end, the coach, a few of the players, and you got those sound bites that you wanted. Like, we're about to play this team that can't hear, and I'm thinking, not to be mean, but how do these kids even know how to play football? Like the typical teenager thinking that you think you would get. And we decided great sound, but you know what? We did the 15-minute version of this film without any sound. Let's go 30 minutes. And we don't need the sound. Not that they said anything bad or not good enough. Let's just take on this challenge of making it even longer and literally not having one spoken word except for the team that they were playing going like, who's going to kill you, us? Like whatever that chant was at the end of the break. That's the only spoken word.
Your challenge paid off. You and your group nailed it. The question that I think a lot of writers and directors don't like, or maybe do, what's next for you?
Oh, I love it. I mean, we're updating Drew's film. We're doing the quote unquote, I've been calling the Zack Snyder cut, like he got to do in Justice League for this film. Basically what just aired on Thursday, this past Thursday, May 13th. We're basically adding the last act to the original version that's streaming on ESPN Plus. Because the original version, you saw Drew get his prosthetic eye and what that meant to him. And then you learned that he was going to get a chance to make the team. And that's when we aired the film at that time. And then we had a chance to follow him in spring training. And we find out he makes the team, and that's what you see leading up to this incredible home run that he just recently hit.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of adding all the good baseball stuff to the original version.
Okay.
I'm doing a short piece, and hopefully I get to do a longer version of a piece to help promote Black Widow. Working for Disney gives me a chance to work for, rub shoulders with Lucasfilm, Marvel. We're doing a story on the Moneymaker sisters. It's focused on Heidi Moneymaker and her younger sister, who's 9 years younger, Renee Moneymaker. They are the two most sought after female stunt women in the business. Heidi doubles for Scarlett Johansson. Renee has done Brie Larson. I mean, from Jennifer Lawrence to just the big name, Drew Barrymore, for Christ's sake. Every name I name, you'll be like, oh yeah, these two ladies, former gymnasts, and how they became, go from gymnastics to becoming two of the most coveted stunt women in the business. So that's coming up, and then I mean, other things on the docket that I can't reveal just yet, but exciting stuff. You'll be one of the first to know. I'll send you a link.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing all the work with me. It's been cool to talk to you in your lab, one of your labs, to see some of those trophies in the back there, to see you rocking
did I
the
sneak
Star
those
Wars
in there?
shirt.
Sorry.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
you
the
did.
Star Wars shirt. Yeah,
but
this is, I'll give you a personal view. Like, this is, I know the podcast world can't see, but you know who this little guy is. We got Grogu, Baby Yoda. We got, I had a friend, Junior Ortiz with Wicked Studios, make this Mandalorian helmet and the spear for me. But see, these are my trophies, man. Like, this is like the helmets and the action figures and the toys. That's my world. The trophies are just a blessing from God. You know what I mean? We use our skills to celebrate the Lord and put him first, and however he wants to use us, right?
There you go. You put some great stories out into the world, and the best sports movies, docs, the best sports books are not just about sports, and you make that very clear through your work.
Appreciate that.
It's been a pleasure. I look forward to watching and hearing about all the great stuff you have in the future, and I wish you great luck in the future.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and God bless your family. And we're always thinking about you and thinking about Tim. And thank you so much for just having me a part of the show.
A pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, those of you at home, for listening to episode 64 with the great Martin Khodabakhshian. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name, the Chills at Will podcast, using Alexa. Find it on Spotify and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look in an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down, and the other song played on the episode is Hoops, instrumental by Matt Whitehour. Both instrumental and great songs are used through archesaudio.com. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts and docs and films by writers with mad skills like Martin Khodabakhshian, whose work gives you chills at will.